Wouldn't it be nice if Adam Sandler didn't count the dates up all so wrong? And wouldn't it be nice to talk together in a format that goes way too long? You know it's time to rewind, baby, for 19 dates of this movie with Drew Barry. Yeah, wouldn't it be nice? Good morning, listeners. It's another beautiful day here on It's Time to Rewind. I'm your host, Bubbawheat, and joining me today is my guest, Tierney Steele. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. And this season we are discussing, what was the movie again?
Oh, it's 50 First Dates.
Oh, right. Well, actually, it's 19 first dates, and we are going through them one date at a time. And this week's date is what I'm calling their 12th date, because it is their 12th interaction, and I would call it their 7th actual date from what we see in the movie. But it does start at 57 minutes and 6 seconds with Lucy coming home from breakfast, and it ends at 66 minutes and 13 seconds with Nothing Beats a First Kiss. So before we jump into today's dates, I am curious to know what is your history with this movie and with Adam Sandler movies in general.
Oh, that's I'll say 50 First Dates first because it's a lot easier. So I saw this movie probably on TV one day. For the young folks listening to your podcast, there used to just be movies on television that you would see just randomly. You didn't seek them out. You didn't know what you were going to watch. Just a movie would start playing and you would watch it. And it's funny because shortly after, this movie is 2004?
4.
Okay. And in the September of 2006, I went to Hawaii and they were still touting like, oh, this is where this filmed, this is where this, and 50 First Dates was one of the ones where I saw several filming locations from. And it was so, I went to Hawaii actually for 6 weeks. No, I was in Hawaii for a month. I ran away to the beach for 6 weeks, because I used to work at a summer camp. And so I graduated from college and I went and worked at summer camp. And then there was nothing waiting for me when camp ended. And I figured, well, what the heck? I can see the world, whatever. So I basically blew every dollar that I made that summer. And I worked, the camp I went to would hire a lot of international staff. And so one of my friends, Rachel, is from England, and her visa would last beyond when camp ended. She usually had about 6 weeks still to travel around the U.S. And so we went down to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina for 2 weeks, and then we went out to Oahu and Maui. And so then I basically just came back with a really great tan, and my hair had turned blonde, and it was October, and I was back in New York like, okay, I guess I need to get a job now. What do I do? How do I adult? And so Hawaii was a huge imprint on me. I absolutely loved it. It's probably one of the best months of my life.
Nice.
I mean, it's not the best. I have a family. I have other things I've done, but it's up there. It's on that top list. And it was just such a magical time. And it was exactly that time where like you'd be driving around and everyone was playing Is What a Wonderful World, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and you know, you were being pointed out like, oh, this is where this filmed. One night, they played that season's premiere of Lost on a big screen on Waikiki Beach, and like actual stars from the show attended. It was just,
Wow.
You know, I'm really glad you did this movie because I had not watched it in a while, and there's a lot of really negative and nasty things that happened in the early aughts, as we're calling them. And this just brought me back to like a good place. Like Lucy walks out of that house and she's wearing like the white jeans and the pink shirt. And I was just like, yes, that was a time in the 2000s. that was wonderful, and I owned all those clothes, and I have been to these places, and it's great.
Nice. And I mean, you don't have to go through your entire history, but in general, like what's your history with Adam Sandler movies and like where, because I know that his movie, even for people that like some of his movies, that he is kind of a divisive person with movie fans.
I was surprised. I remember seeing something that talked about like, oh, that classic romantic comedy duo, Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I just totally missed that part. But, I grew up in the age where everyone knew every line. I went to college and we had Happy Gilmore and Billy Madison memorized word by word. Another thing, kids, is that we used to watch the same movies over and over again on these magical things called videotapes and DVDs. I know this is crazy talk, but it happened. And I like them. I haven't seen all his movies. It was never something that I sought out. But I now live in the area where they're I have been in houses that were in Adam Sandler movies because I live in the part of the country where he films a bunch of them. And I've actually been in a restaurant with him at the same time, and everyone pointed, and I was like, what are we looking at? That cute baby in a stroller? And 20 minutes later, they were like, we were pointing at Adam Sandler. I was like, what? Adam Sandler was here? So part of my brain has seen Adam Sandler, but not the conscious part of my brain because I didn't realize who I was looking at the time. And I kind of appreciate that like, he still just is that guy. He is still just that regular guy who's going to go to the local restaurant, and he's not going to get dressed up, and the restaurant is not going to be shut down for him. And he's just going to look like every other middle-aged man in that restaurant.
Yeah, and yet now that we live in a time where apparently Murder Mystery 2 was one of the top 20 movies streamed in the first half of Netflix, and yet I didn't even realize that came out.
Yeah. So it's like I would never represent myself as like, oh, I'm this massive Adam Sandler fan. But I've also seen a lot of his movies. Like when I was rewatching this, there were a bunch of people where I was like, oh, that's that guy. I should look up what else, let me look at his IMDb. Let me see what else he's been on. I want to bring some material to your podcast. And I would look, and it's like, he has been in only Adam Sandler movies. It's like, oh, so I guess that's where I know him from. So yeah, it was a fun revisit. This obviously is not a movie that I like, oh, I have to watch it every year, or anything like that.
Yeah, and then I guess let's go ahead and go into today's date. And this, I actually don't remember, even though, for people listening at home, I just edited last week's episode last night. But I don't remember if I talked about how at the end of that scene, we do see Henry pulling the scrapbook out of Marlon's car. And that really ties into what we see in this, in today's scene.
You can't remember? How very meta of you. Method podcasting here, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, but I do remember that we did talk about how weird it was that Lucy's big clue to so that Henry doesn't strike out is that she likes lilies, and we did talk about how weird that was, and like how is he going to incorporate lilies into a daily conversation. But I think it's what he does with it here in this scene is nice, where he just kind of plays like the delivery man and with a bouquet of lilies from a quote unquote secret admirer.
And her reaction is just really sweet. When she's like, I have a secret admirer. Like, it's just, I love Drew Barrymore. I will somewhat brag to a very small audience, but it's also a very small connection. I'm technically related to Drew Barrymore. I mean, it's like a percentage of a percentage of a percentage of a percentage, but technically.
Like fourth cousins twice removed.
Yes, exactly. But I have seen a picture in a family photo album, and that person was a Barrymore, so technically we are related, but it's like 1800s nonsense. So no one but my grandmother, who was super into genealogy, would ever have made this connection. But so I grew up by grandmother telling me, like, you know, she kind of had this protective thing, because I mean, Drew Barrymore did not have the easiest upbringing. And she was so good in E.T. And it was just like, that's our girl. Like, so I really like getting to watch a movie where you just get to like this character. You just get to be happy for it. And you just get to see how, like, tickled pink she is to have a secret admirer who sends her flowers.
Yeah, and I also really love how natural, like how quickly Henry is adapted to the situation too, and how natural we see Marlon with it, where Henry is talking about how, you know, you have a secret admirer, and he's like, no, I can't tell you who he is just yet. And then Marlon is like, oh, who's your friend here? As if Marlon has never met Henry before in his life.
Yeah. And then we get the tape.
Yeah.
Which I like. I think it's later, but at some point, Henry says to him, like, because I forget who, but someone says, like, I don't think this is a good idea. And Henry's like, if it isn't, we've only wasted a day.
Yeah, that's here in this, because that's like right after this, whenever Lucy goes inside with the flowers and the tape, Marlon comes over. Marlon comes over and he goes into protective dad mode, and he's like, you know, what are you doing with this tape? And that's when Henry says, oh, I'm just trying something different. If it doesn't work, then we've only wasted a day and we can go back to your plan tomorrow. Yeah.
And you're right, because this hasn't been that long. Like, you were doing the math, or seventh date or whatever. But yeah, he's just fit right into this, almost like it's meant to be.
Yeah, and I think it's also funny that he has that little joke where, you know, how old are you? Like 250. Although I did the math. I mean, not, you know, it's still very estimated math, but they do reference how it's been about a year since the accident. So if you think that Lucy has wished her dad a happy birthday every single day for a year, plus how old he actually is, that would put him over 400 years old at this point.
That was a good dig. Yeah, I was trying to, like, remember, because I first watched the clip out of context, and I was trying to remember, like, was this animosity between them? Were they like friendly by this point or not? So that was a good dig.
Mm-hmm. And then I definitely have a fair amount of notes for this tape, because we do get the zoom in on the TV screen, and we have the Good Morning Lucy, everything's going to be okay. And two things, like, let me ask you, because I feel I'm not sure if it's just because I'm too deep into this movie, and I've seen the whole movie like 2 or 3 times since starting this, and I've seen this clip a couple times. So I don't know if it's just me having deja vu from, like, I'm remembering that this looks like something because it reminds me of this movie. But does it remind you of anything else, like, that it could be referencing? Because I couldn't think of anything too much.
Nothing came to mind, like, as a specific referencing sort of thing.
Yeah, there are 2 things where I think it kind of reminds me of, where I don't necessarily think that it was the filmmaker's intention that they were referencing this, but it's just what my head thinks of. The first one is, do you remember the music video for Van Halen's Right Now?
Oh, as soon as you said that, I could picture it in my head, but before that, if you had said, what's the, like, yes, but only because of osmosis and culture.
Where the whole music video is a bunch of, like, news clips and the things like, you know, right now you could be doing this right now. Your life is passing you 1 minute at a time, Brad. Like all this
Yeah.
different things, and it's like the same fonts, but it's not quite the same thing.
There
But
was
it
some
does give me
other music video that did that too, I feel like.
I think so, possibly.
Okay.
And the other one with the line, everything's going to be okay, it kind of vaguely reminds me of like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, like, the don't panic, where it's like, it's something soothing, but also kind of almost sinister, because it's like, everything's going to be okay. It's reassuring you, but also it's kind of a warning to make you think that, oh, something's bad's coming.
Because that's how she reacts when it says, like, everything's gonna be okay, and she's like, what the hell? I mean, she doesn't say what the hell, but, like, that's kind of the equivalent.
Yeah, and then, of course, I got to go through some of the clips here. The first clip is, very brief, and it's just like palm trees blowing in a hurricane, and it says, like, it hit North Shore. And my best guess is that they're talking about Hurricane, I think, Jemina, which hit Hawaii late August, early September of 2003. It wasn't like extremely severe, but it was kind of one of those, because I think I read in that it's actually relatively rare for hurricanes to actually hit that part of the Pacific.
Yeah. I mean, they get lots of rain, but usually it's more like the storm is somewhere off somewhere and you're dealing with the effects of it, not like straight on hit the way, like, I grew up with people that lived in Florida and North Carolina, where it's like, okay, where's it going to make landfall?
Right. And then after that, we just get a brief clip of the Saddam Hussein statue being torn down, which was from April 2003. And
we can't get into that, or your entire podcast will be hijacked.
Yeah, I just wanted to reference, and I don't need to go through the whole backstory.
If you were alive for it, you remember, and if you weren't alive for it, you wouldn't believe us if we told you.
And then we have the Martha Stewart facing criminal charges, where she was indicted in June 2003. And I also think that it's funny that the very next clip is Snoop Dogg saying that he quits weed. And I think it's so
forever
insane.
Linked.
Yeah, this clip and the Red Sox winning the World Series are like two of the most prophetic moments of this video that Adam Sandler created for this movie. It's so bizarre because back then there was zero links between Martha Stewart and Snoop Dogg, and now in 2023 they are like best friends, and they have like a joint business venture. It is insane to think that Martha Stewart and Snoop Dogg would be a power duo.
Yeah, when they made this, that was not these were two totally unrelated news stories that now our brains can't help lumping together.
Yes. That is so bizarre. And I did look up, I did try to find, like, do you remember the Snoop Dogg quitting weed story from 2003 at all?
I did not at all. I was not that kid. Now, I did grow up in Fairfield County, so I was very aware of Martha Stewart going to jail. But, like, Snoop Dogg, I could not have told you which songs he sang at all, even though I'd heard a bunch of them on the radio, but, like, on the radio. I did not. That was not my world.
Yeah, I'm kind of, I mean, I could tell, I knew which songs were Snoop Dogg songs. Like, I know Gin and Juice, but I was not like a big Snoop fan.
Yeah. Now, after many decades, I can recognize his voice. But at the time, I probably couldn't even have done that. I would have just been able to say, like, all right, that's probably West Coast versus East Coast. That's as far as I got in my education.
Yeah, and apparently this was from his, like, I think it was the very first episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live, because I believe he had Snoop Dogg as a co-host, And the main reason why I know that, I couldn't find any clips from that first episode, but he did have a 20th anniversary special just recently, like this past year, where he brought on Snoop Dogg again, and he referenced the fact that he came on as a co-host in that first in the early part of his show, and that he said that he was giving up smoking weed. And he said, in the 20th anniversary special, Jimmy Kimmel was like, "So how's that going?" And Snoop Dogg said, "Well, I've relapsed."
Yeah.
And of course, just recently, he went on social media, I think just a few weeks ago, and he made a post saying that he was giving up smoking.
Yeah, it was really recent. It was kind of trippy to then watch this clip and be like, "Oh, wait, what?"
Yeah, although I believe, like, I just heard it, like, on the radio. I didn't go back and look it up, but I believe that he later clarified that he wasn't giving up weed, he was just giving up smoking. So I believe that he's either still, like he's switching to marijuana vaping, or he's just using edibles.
Yeah, I saw it as part of a joke saying, next week Snoop Dogg will announce a line of edibles, watch. Like, he's just trying to boost the market.
And then right after Snoop giving up weed, we get just this brief clip of Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, which it did premiere in 2003 and I guess became a huge hit. I've never actually watched it myself. Have you ever seen Queer Eye?
I have, not in many years. And I actually couldn't tell you if I've ever seen a whole episode, but it was such a part of the zeitgeist. Like, it is crazy to me. I'm actually reading right now Alan Sepinwall's book, the Welcome to the OC, which is the oral history interviewing all of them. And I had kind of forgotten how, not monoculture, but like, you could talk about things being in the zeitgeist and everyone knew what they were, even if they didn't watch them, even if they didn't know details. Like, you could just know. I could have had a whole conversation about Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, probably never having seen a full episode, certainly never seeking it out, but I just knew about it.
Although I could never, I don't think I could ever name any of the guys from the show.
No,
but I knew that there's like 5 of them.
Yeah,
I would recognize them for sure. And I think whenever they came back with, I think they just called it Queer Eye on Netflix just a couple of years ago. I think I started to try to watch it, but then I got distracted and never actually watched a full episode. And then, of course, we get the May Snoop back on weed as the second half of that joke. And then we get the fake out of the Red Sox win the World Series and the just kidding.
Yeah. Which, the irony that Drew Barrymore would ever so soon be starring in Fever Pitch. Ah!
Yeah, and it was literal, like, this video is about 2003, and the movie came out February 2004, and then the Red Sox would actually win the World Series in 2004 is, again, it's so bizarre to wrap your head around.
It's a beautiful thing.
And then after that, we have the whole Schwarzenegger wins the governor of California and the not kidding tag after it. And again, that was like a big thing back then. And I was actually surprised. Like, if I asked you, how long do you think Schwarzenegger was governor of California?
Is he not still? No, I'm kidding. But it felt like it seemed like such a joke at first, which is why we have the not kidding. Like, it seems like it should be a joke. Like, that could never be a thing. But then it felt like he was there for forever.
Yeah, he was governor from 2003, which I didn't remember this because I wasn't from California, apparently. He won, it was a recall election, so he replaced the governor that got ousted or it died. I didn't actually read that deeply because
I can't believe I can't remember. Oh,
Yeah.
Don't tell my political boyfriends at the time and current.
Because we are recording this the day after Christmas, so I did some last minute notes, and so I didn't do quite as much research. And anyways, this is supposed to be a hiatus, a mini hiatus podcast. So I'm not supposed to be doing that much research for this one, because this is supposed to be the fun episode where I do all the heavier research for Fight Club Minutes, which is going on its own feed.
I just want like Jon Favreau or John Lovett to burst into my door and be like, "It was this," and explain the whole thing to me.
But yeah, anyway. he was governor from 2003 through 2011. So he won that recall election, and then he won re-election, and then I think he went through that full term.
Yeah.
And then after that, we get the start of the in-universe news stories, starting with the article about Doug getting disqualified for steroids, which they've been referencing throughout the movie already.
Can we mention what a trip it was to see Sean Astin in this little brother joke of a role with the steroids and all of it? And then to realize that this was right in the midst of Lord of the Rings mania.
Yes, this was, let's see. Yeah, he would have been done filming, except for potentially maybe some reshoots for Return of the King. But yeah, this was right, a couple of months after Two Towers and before Return of the King would come out in December of this year.
This man was a god.
Or no,
this is so funny to see him in this role. And before that, he'd been rude.
My dates are a little bit off because Return of the King would have just come out December, and then this came out in February. So he's
right.
just done with Lord of the Rings.
He could do the man went from Goonies to Roadie to Lord of the Rings, and I always forget that he was ever in anything like that. He would do these little roles that, like, why not?
Yeah.
But he's playing such a joke.
I mean, I love him. Like, he's kind of a weird character, but if it was anybody else other than Sean Astin, I don't think I would like Doug as a character. But because it's Sean Astin, I just can't help but love him.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of goes to, well, we're in universe now in the videotape, and we're about to get to my thing where I just in all Adam Sandler movies, and we can talk about how things have aged as we move on with this clip, but the joke always goes that little bit too far, where like I'm laughing and I think things are funny, and then he's like rubbing the coconuts, and I'm just like, did we need to do quite this? And it's I don't know. I'm not the target audience for Adam Sandler humor. I know that, and that's fine. And some of it I think is really funny, and some of it not quite as much.
Yeah, I feel like in this movie he tries to have it both ways, especially in this scene, because we do get the shots of the scrapbook, showing about her accident, and then we get into the recreation.
The reenactment.
The reenactment with Henry and Ula's kid filming, which that's a great little moment, because it's always great for them to reference Ula's kids, which are much more entertaining than Ula as a character in general. But yeah, if we get this, and it's it's kind of cute and funny at first with Rob Schneider and Hawaiian face and the mop head wig and the coconut bra, and he even has the pink shirt too, but he's not wearing white pants.
Well, can't have everything. But yeah, it just took me back to a time when, like, in every friend group someone would have a video camera. You would make stupid little videos with your friends. And a lot of the times the joke would go too far, so it wasn't as funny anymore. In
Yeah,
many
and
ways, it's very realistic.
yeah, and again, they try to have it both ways by letting Rob Schneider take it too far, but then because within in universe, Henry tells him,
Yeah.
"Hey, you're taking it too far." So
Yes.
so he even realizes within the movie
Yeah.
that they took it a step too far.
And it's the sweetness of him being like, all right, ignore my stupid friend. And I loved everyone being able to talk to Lucy in the way that they haven't in so long. I got like almost a little too emotional at that when she was, like I was best friends with your mom, and it was just like, oh my God, because these people have been like playing this part around her. They
Yeah.
haven't been able to just talk to her like a normal person.
Yeah, it's like they've been avoiding the trauma rather than dealing with it head on, and this is really the first opportunity that they have to deal with this trauma head on. And yeah, that nice little moment with Sue is great, and it really covers a lot of ground too. I feel like this movie is very economical in a lot of ways, and just in this one brief scene we kind of get the fact that Lucy's mom is apparently dead, which her mom's never really been referenced before now. She's just not been in the picture. And we find out that Sue was best friends with Lucy's mom and agreed to look out for her. And so that's why Sue's been playing this whole part throughout the movie up to this point. And on top of that, at the very end, she vouches for Henry, saying that he's a nice guy, which that immediately helps give Lucy the perspective about him from somebody that she knows and trusts.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. It is really, well, it's funny because when I first looked at the timestamp, I was like, whoa, we're already an hour into the movie and we're just getting the video, but it makes sense when you watch it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just felt like this came so much earlier, but I guess there was a lot to establish before we could do this scene.
Yeah. And then we also get this nice little visual gag with Nick, which apparently that must have been something that he set up with Henry beforehand so that he gets the timing right on the zoom to accentuate the punchline. With him carrying the garbage bags and not actually being governor of Hawaii like he was saying.
Yeah. And again, that's something you would do, fooling around with your friends in a video camera and like, oh my God, do this. Okay, I'll stand here.
Yeah, and I think Drew Barrymore does a fantastic job through this whole scene. Like they give a lot of reaction shots to her, and she is always like just playing the right mix of sad and shocked and confused, and like really plays it well.
Yeah, I remember reading a lot of criticism of this movie and like how that's not realistic, that's not how it works, like with actual neurologists and stuff. And on the one hand, like I understand that you could take a step back and be like, this is a really upsetting premise for a movie. But Drew Barrymore really, like, she's just a sweet person, but not like a doormat person in this, like she feels like a full character, even though it is within this completely ridiculous constraint.
Yeah, it's like, and I talked about it early in one of the early episodes about how this condition isn't real, at least not in the way that is presented in this movie. But if you put that aside and pretend like that is a real condition that does happen in the way that the movie presents it, then you just look at all the rest and how everybody reacts to it. And I think that it handles the premise pretty well, especially in terms, and we'll get to it whenever we get to the end of this date. Like, I think in terms of like consent and also dealing with disability and things of that nature. Because there is that moment right at the end of her watch tape where she asks how many, which it's a very intelligent question from her, where she asks how many times has I watched this tape, and they're like, Yeah, this is the first time, because that is like really such an intelligent question for her to ask. So it
Oh.
really shows a lot about her character and who she
Hmm.
is as a person.
That was the other like heartbreaking moment when she asked that, and the way she's just so sad. Oh.
Yeah, and then we go to this moment with her kind of taking a moment for herself, and this we get this perspective between Henry and Marlon, and this nice little back and forth, and Henry mentions the fact that she cried for an hour, but now she can move on with her life, and like that is he goes through that so quickly, but again, if you take a step back and think about the reality of this situation. Like, if they do this every day
Mm-hmm.
and she cries for an hour every single day, it's like dealing with an hour of trauma every single day of your life, waking up to the realization of being in this condition is insane. Like, that's a horror movie almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And um and like Henry is as a character is focused on, okay, this means that Lucy can get on with her life and move past the trauma. And then Marlon is in a very fatherly way, he's like, we'll leave it up to her, which I think those are both very good points, and they both come from a place of love and wanting to do what's in Lucy's best interests.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, neither one of them are like selfish or self-serving, even though in a way, they kind of have self-serving motivations for the way that they've been dealing with Lucy up to this point. Like, Henry wants to date her and Marlon wants to protect her. And I think that moment between them is a really nice moment in this movie.
Yeah, and they're both very human reactions to the situation. Like, they're not, like you said, they might be kind of self-centered, but that's because everyone is self-centered to some extent. Like, you can't help it as a human. And there isn't any, like, you might disagree with Henry's approach or you might disagree with Marlon's approach, but they did not come up with them from a place of malice or anything. Like, they both really, like you said, want Lucy to be happy. So, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And then we get this gorgeous sunset shot, which it looks like it's coming from The Lion King, even though it's Hawaii.
I used to watch like check in on live surf cams and listen to wave recordings and stuff. And it's like, I mean, even though when you listen to a wave recording, you don't know, like, it could be anywhere, but it's like, no, it's Hawaii. I swear, I can tell. It's just the absolute best. Yeah.
And we get this great moment of flirting between the two of them, and it's very playful, and this really shows the chemistry between Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore, and part of the reason why this movie works so well, and just their sense of humor as characters and how they bounce off of each other. And it's really cute and sweet and funny, all wrapped up together.
I really liked that, they're on this date, they're a couple, they're dating, I think you're my boyfriend, whatever. But I love that part of his date was like, she wanted to catch up with her friends. And like that he's not like, oh, I'm going to take her out to some romantic place. Oh, I want, like, now that she knows the truth, I want some time with her alone. It's like, no, let's go hang out with your friends and you can find out what everyone's been up to now that you know. And yeah.
And again, this kind of jumps back to the almost like horror show. Like, whenever you start thinking of the reality of this situation, that she has basically been isolated for the better part of a year. And she probably hasn't had any contact with any of her friends over the course of this year.
Because, like, yeah, it's very clear that she is not up to date with them. But and also the fact that, like, these people must have kind of like dropped what they were doing to come to this party, probably. Like, I don't know. I thought it was really nice that, like, this is how she wants to spend her evening. Like,
yeah, I think it's nice, but
but she's
it's
open.
also kind of sad
It
because I know I've
right.
mentioned in earlier episodes about how Marlon and Doug's routine with her is a way for them to keep her isolated and in the house for the majority of the day. Really, the only time that she gets out of the house is going to the Hukilau for breakfast, and then she comes home and she's home all day.
Yeah. It's I totally but you know what I mean? Like she wants to catch up with her friends. She wants to spend this time with them, but she's still open to this romantic relationship with this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of I don't know, it works for me. Now, I do think there are things in this scene that have not aged well sitting here in my 2023-2024 perspective, wincing.
Yeah,
But like,
there's definitely a couple things.
y'all,
I mean, the first thing that I'm going to mention, which I think you might have even like missed it or overlooked it, but the person singing in this little luau is Rob Schneider as Ula, and he is wearing this. I don't even know what it's like a grass skirt, but then it's also like the top and hat is also made of leaves, which feels very inauthentic, and it's bad enough that he's playing a Hawaiian, even though he's only 1/4 Filipino. But and I didn't do any major research. It does sound like he's singing in Hawaiian, and I really hope that they did their due diligence and he's actually singing a Hawaiian song and not just singing Hawaiian sounding gibberish.
yeah. And there are enough songs in Hawaiian. Like, it wouldn't take that much to have done. I don't know. Again, if we get into racial makeup of Hawaiian versus people who live in Hawaii and who is Hawaiian, we could be here for months. That would not be your cool laid back hiatus show that you signed up for. But yes, no, like you said, you called it Hawaiian face. Again, this is just something that used to happen. I don't know how, like, I'm glad that generations are doing it better now. Like, I'm glad that this doesn't happen anymore, but I don't know how else other than like the jokes about the trans person. Like, that's just, that would have been considered incredibly progressive. This is how I feel like I am a crazy person whenever I talk about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the TV show, and what we thought was progressive. What was progressive for the time, but now, it's not. Oh, it's not.
Yeah, that's something that I've definitely been. I've talked about several times. I'm not sure if I've talked about it with every guest, but I've brought it up with most guests, even whenever the one character and she's not in this scene, but in this scene we do have. It's funny because I've been talking about Alexa as a character a lot because she is kind of a weird character looking at it from a 2023 perspective. But here we do have the character of Jonathan, who is someone who, it's surprising that even in 2003, it's the word trans wasn't really.
No, not a thing.
I mean, I mean, it probably existed, but it was not.
But people would have been like, wait, you mean like Rocky Horror Picture Show? Like, you would mix up those words constantly.
Yeah, and so here they refer to Jonathan as someone who has had a gender reassignment surgery.
Yeah.
And they do treat it as a joke because it's somebody played by a cis male actor, or at least a cis male actor. And he is playing it as very, like, almost like a flamboyantly gay character. He's, he has, the very high-pitched mannerisms, and he talks in a very feminine way, and he has the line of, I have to go tinkle.
Yeah. It's played for a joke, but it could have been played for a worse joke. I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things where it is weirdly, it feels like it is trying to be progressive for 2003, and like Lucy is so open.
Yes.
with him, and she does, like,
And
she
everyone
accidentally
is like,
dead names him as Jennifer, and then like
yeah.
corrects herself immediately as Jonathan. But as a character, she is very open and accepting.
But
There's like
also,
no
so are
judgment
the
on
other
her part.
friends. Like Jonathan has
Yeah.
been invited to this party. Jonathan is still part of the friend group that hangs. So
Mhm.
again, like you said, it is for 2003. It is incredibly progressive, and from 2023, it is incredibly cringe.
Yeah, and I think that's the same way with the character Alexa, who I think if this movie was made in 2023, I think that Alexa would be a fully non-binary character, and they would potentially even go by like they them pronouns. But in 2003, it's a woman who seems kind of mannish, like she's very masculine, and the characters kind of make jokes about her being masculine, and she even kind of leans into the jokes. And I think it feels progressive for 2003 or 2004 just because of how optimistic and open she is as a character. Like she as a character is never offended by any of the comments or the jokes, and the jokes, at least from my perspective, never feel too mean spirited. They feel more playful. Like, what do you think about Alexa as a character, kind of from that perspective?
I just filed it all away under, well, yeah, no, we would do this differently today. um, but no, it didn't like take me out of the movie. I think I just turned off that part of my brain and kind of was like, all right, this is what it is. This is what we're watching. And knowing that it could have been worse, like, again, like you said, it's not, this movie does not have a mean bone in its body. That cannot be said of all, and generally Adam Sandler movies are pretty happy and light and loving, but sometimes there's a little bit of a mean spirit to some of it, and this movie has none of that. This movie is just all about being open and optimistic and hoping and just wanting everyone to be happy at the end of the day, and whatever form that happiness takes and whatever that ends up being, we don't care. It's fine. There is no snark here.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of weird looking at this group of friends, because I didn't double check, but it seems like they are all no-name actors and Maya Rudolph.
Oh, that happens. She's got to have friends too,
Yeah. And I know you mentioned it just a little bit ago, but I think it is very important that we have this line from Lucy where she says where she basically affirms that Henry is in fact her boyfriend, because again, this movie goes out of its way in terms of consent to make sure that we as an audience know that Lucy is fully on board with Henry being her boyfriend, and that she is okay with this once she realizes what's happening, and in every step of the way gives her consent to Henry to continue this relationship into the next day, even though she as a character will forget about it.
And the little one-on-one part with them is just so beautifully played. It's so sweet. I mean, I think you're right in that it is important that we not only get the consent between the two of them, but like you said, just affirming it to our friends, like public, like, I am in a relationship with this guy. We make it work. Again, this movie just wants everyone to be happy and make it work, whatever that looks like for them.
Yeah, and then again, we just get this continuation of this cute moment between the two of them, and now it's on into the evening, so you know that they've spent the entire day together, because he did come to her like right after breakfast, and then the video, the party, and I mean, I think that this all happened in a single day.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Do you agree with
I
that?
think this is all a single day, for sure.
Yeah. Even though there is like several costume changes, because I think Lucy wears like 3 different outfits.
Oh, okay. I thought it
But
was the same dress from the last one, but who knows? It doesn't matter. It's still cute.
I mean, she's definitely wearing she's wearing like the black polka dot dress in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And then she's wearing this red and black striped shirt, which she is wearing the same outfit in the party and in the evening.
That's what I was thinking of, where I was like, okay, they've got, because it to me read like, okay, there was a party and then the date is continuing, as the best dates do.
Yeah. And this is like such a sweet moment, and this is like this is like the most incredible romantic comedy answer where, Lucy asks, "Do you love me?" And, and of course she couches it with, "I just want to make sure that the videotape is as up to date as possible."
Mm-hmm.
And again, Henry kind of gives initially the waffling answer where he's like, love is a very strong word. Like it's a very loaded word, but then he goes into I love you very much, probably more than anybody could love another person. So that's like the romantic comedy gut punch right there.
Yeah. And then when she asks, "Do I love you?" Oh, it's so good. This is such a stupid concept for a movie, and it's done so well.
Yeah. I mean, it hits all the great notes, and I think it really works very well. And we also get this moment with their first kiss.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's nice. And again, I think it works well, again, in terms of the whole consent, because it's prompted by Henry, but it is initiated by Lucy. And I think that is, again, it's very important with the concept of the movie, that it's almost always Lucy is the one in charge of moving the relationship forward.
Yeah. A level of emotional intelligence you don't always expect from these movies.
Especially whenever you're talking about an Adam Sandler movie. But I have consistently been impressed with how this movie goes out of its way to show the healthiest possible relationship in this bizarre situation.
Mm-hmm. And that's where we end with that line.
Yeah, the nothing beats a first kiss, which we'll talk about more in the next few weeks as we lead into the montage. But that's the end of this date.
Yeah. How has it been doing a podcast about a story where you're not, like, you are repeating? It makes sense that you're doing 51st Dates on Time to Rewind, but the entire story isn't repeating. It's only repeating for this one character.
I mean, it's interesting, especially like I feel like this is coming right after Memento, which the structure of Memento it's very, like, there are some very short scenes, but going from the structure of Memento to going to this, where we have like blocks of montages where we have dates, scenes that are just a minute long or 30 seconds long, or for the next 2 weeks, like 10 to 15 seconds long. And then we have scenes that are a full 10 minutes long. Like this one is like 9 minutes long. It's different, but it's interesting. And I kind of like the change of pace, doing like a light romantic comedy.
That's true. That's definitely not the genre Memento's in.
But yeah, I've been enjoying it, and especially, like, even though there are like the Rob Schneider moments which are cringy, and some of the stuff that's kind of dated, like you said, the emotional intelligence of the writing has been very surprising, and I've really appreciated that, as well as the way you can look at this as in terms of like people dealing with a disability, which is what that can be. And aside from all the cringy comedy, it does the relationship and the dealing with a disability in a very progressive way and in a very healthy way in a lot of ways.
And I will say, I won't say any spoilers just in case you have listeners that are following along, but I love the ending to this movie. I always have. It's really good. And I get a little callback to my tape, so I feel like I will be with you guys in spirit through the rest of this journey. But yeah, I've always loved the end of this movie.
I mean, I don't shy away from spoilers too much, but is there anything else about this movie? This is the end of our date here in this episode, but this is your only week here on this show. But is there anything else about this movie in general that you wanted to bring up before I let you go?
I got a nice big chunk. No, I really just wanted to reminisce about Hawaii, and I think I'm probably going to go, check the weather, call Surfline, that sort of thing. That's, this and Blue Crush definitely scratch that itch for me. So, yeah. Thank you for having me on.
Nice. It was great to have you. Thank you so much for joining me and talking with me today. And for the listeners at home that might not be familiar with you and your other work, why don't you go ahead and take a moment to let them know where else you can be found online?
Oh, sure. Well, you introduced me. I'm Tierney Steele. My handle online, although I'm not in as many places anymore, it's One Steele Sister, ONESTEELESISTER. And if you throw a .com on there, you'll find my website, which has links to the podcasts I have done, movies by minutes in various formats, and my guest appearances. And it also has a link to my book that I wrote, and I'm in the midst of writing another one, and it's a lot, so please love me. No, I'm kidding. And it's funny, actually, my book, it does not involve time travel or repeated instances, but for readers, it's a bit of time travel. It's set in August of 2000, and it's about high school seniors on the last night before they split up they're not high school seniors anymore. They graduated. It's their last night in their hometown before splitting up for college. And so I just wanted to marinate in that time period. And it drove my sister, who's a librarian, nuts because she's like, Tierney, this is a young adult novel, but all the references are for you old people. And I was like, let me have this. I need this. So I wrote the book that I wanted to read, and it is chock full of late 90s references and a character who's heard about the filming of Lord of the Rings and is really worried because she hopes the movies are as good as the books, sort of thing. And so, yeah, if you like that world, you would love my novel, The Post Road. So that's my pitch.
Nice. That sounds right up my alley. If I read more often, I would definitely pick that up. But I'm the type of person where I will get a book and it will sit on my shelf for a week, and then I'll borrow it from the library, and then I'll get the due date notification and I'll be like, oh crap, I haven't read it. So, okay, let me renew it. And then it'll sit on my shelf for another 3 weeks. And then I'll be like, well, crap, I should just go ahead and return it back to the library.
I will say, I don't know if I've said this on any other podcast, but there is going to be an audiobook. But I'm waiting. I'm actually writing a sequel, and my thought is that I will do the audiobook as the 2 books in one thing. So if you're listening to this and that's okay, but Tierney, I really love audiobooks better. Oh, I got your back. Just not quite yet.
Nice. Audiobooks is something that I can do because I listen to tons of podcasts, and as long as I can find it, it's easy to switch to an audiobook for a while. But I am Bubbawheat, and you can find this show, It's Time to Rewind, on all the available podcatchers out there. You can also join our Facebook group, It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group, and you can discuss podcast episodes as they come out and stay up to date with what's coming in future seasons, as well as have discussions about time loop movies, TV shows, books, anything past, present, or future. It's all welcome there. And until next time, I will see you again for breakfast next week. Okay, she cried for about an hour.
That's not too bad. I bet in another hour she'll be ready to see her friends, have some lunch, get her life back. We could do this every day.
We'll leave it up to her.